Hi everyone, Tony Tonkin here from the Child Protection Party. This is part of a series of presentations we're making in relation to how you could work with the department more effectively if they've become involved in your life. Today, though, we're going to talk about what do you do when you receive documentation and how do you respond to that documentation. Now, there are many forms of documents that are issued in relation to child protection, and I guess the first one that you may ever receive may be asked to sign a safety plan, which is an initial part of the investigation and which is there to ensure, from the department's perspective, that your child is safe. I do need to say that firstly, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't make statements that are legally binding or not. But what I can say is that unless there's a court order, you don't really need to have to sign anything. So if you're presented with a case plan and you disagree with the way that case plan is written, the requests that they're making of you, then you actually don't have to sign it. But it does mean, though, that then they may take further action, they may take court action, they may invoke a section of the legislation that may mean that they do take your child from you. So if that is imminent, if that's a threat, then I would suggest that if signing the safety plan means that you get to keep your child, then I guess that's probably a good thing or a better option than having the child removed. It's sad that they'll blackmail you into signing a safety plan. It makes their activities seem legitimate, but that's just the way it is, unfortunately. The next form of documents that you may receive may be a parent incapacity assessment. Now, I've done a video now on parent incapacity assessment, so I won't bother explaining that any further. The following document that you may receive may be court documents or an affidavit from court, which is the department laying out their reasons why they are concerned about your child or children. Now, I just want to say about documents, this is about documents in general, receiving a document. Most parents, I find, are distressed by the fact that they have been presented with a document that outlines their lives, and there are things that are said within that document that the parent won't agree with. And I think it's important to be able to read the documents with the view that this is someone else's version of you. This is not necessarily your version. And they're focusing on just the negative things that happen in your life. And in my experience working with parents is that there's lots of really positive things that happen for them, which are not necessarily highlighted or mentioned in any of these documents, regretfully. So it is important to keep a distance. It's also important, I think, when you've received a document to have someone with you while you're going through that document, someone you trust, an advocate, a very close friend maybe, not necessarily a partner or someone who's involved in the process, but someone who sits outside that process. And you can go through the document and outline the things that you disagree with. That is fine. Highlight them in highlighter pen or in biro or whatever, but just highlight the things that you disagree with in their documentation. The thing that you need to be aware of, I guess, is that the document, though, is pointing out what the department believes are the issues in relation to you. And it's those issues that you need to identify and find time to address, because the documentation is simply saying, this is our version of you. It's not saying that you have to agree with that version, I guess, but the department will expect some response from you to address the issues of concern. Now, the things that you can't address are past relationships. For example, you can't address necessarily past criminality, and you can't address issues around mental well-being if they've already been overcome. If you've dealt with them in the past, there's no need to address them again. You can't necessarily address some of those issues, but you certainly can talk about them and how they impacted you. So when you're presented with this documentation, though, it's really important that if you're presented with it and the department's present, when you have been received the documentation, you either accept feedback from them, you just listen to what they have to say, or you read it yourself and then go through it line by line and work out what has to be said or what is said. And it's really important, I think, to actually read it. There's lots of clients I work with who won't read it. They find it just too painful. Read it. Read everything that's in there, or get someone else to read it for you if you're finding that too difficult. But go through it line by line and work out what is appropriate, what isn't, what actually are the departments saying about you. With some of this documentation also, you'll get to the end of it and you'll start to think, okay, if this documentation is the stuff that's given to the magistrate and the magistrate has to make a decision based just on the documentation alone, then it's the end of the game, because clearly I'm not going to get the kids back if they believe everything's in the documentation. I have discovered that I can read someone's documentation and think that this is a terrible picture that's been painted of this person. And if I read the documentation and haven't yet met the parent, it's easy to judge who this person is according to the documentation. So we need to withhold our judgments, which is what I do, and then we need to be able to get to know who the person is. So this is somebody else's view of who you are. This is not necessarily who you think you are, nor who others think you are. So take the documentation, see it as something that a version someone else has of you, and remember that over time, between the time that you're given that documentation and potentially either the time to go into court or the time that you have with the social workers from the department, you will have an opportunity to demonstrate that you're not the sum total of the negative stuff they've said about you. So the documentation, their view, you need to find a way to be able to express and find different ways, I guess, of identifying who you actually are that may in fact contradict the impression given to you via the documents provided by the department. Now, I hope that's helpful to you. If you have any issues or you want to talk about this further, please email us on the address below. Thanks everybody for being here. Take care, look after yourselves, and more importantly, be safe.